Ever found some weird old thing in your new apartment and wondered what it was? Wouldn't it be great if you'd taken it to the pawn shop and found out it was worth thousands of dollars? These people didn't just dream that. It actually happened to them. These are the biggest jackpots ever seen on Pawnstars. Number 15. Order of the White Eagle Medallion. While the owner of this object didn't get paid nearly as much as the other people on this list, he has to be included because he paid basically nothing for this piece he sold. He enjoyed visiting yard sales, hoping he'd one day find something valuable. This was his lucky day. He spotted a medal that looked pretty impressive and decided to buy it for only 75 cents. He had no idea what kind of profit he was about to make off this tiny purchase. The medal he'd found was actually an Order of the White Eagle Medallion, the highest level of decoration you can be awarded in Poland for civil or military services. This particular one dates back to Tsarist rule in Poland, which was around the early 19th century. Rick spotted that the beautiful medal was probably valuable, even though he didn't know what it was. So he offered the new owner $6,000 for it. That's more than a 6,000% profit. Crazy, right? But Rick was about to find out he can earn a huge profit off it too. An expert later showed up to let Rick know that the medallion was worth about $30,000, so that was a pretty good deal. Number 14. Book of Mormon. This might surprise you, but one of the most valuable things that ever showed up in the Pawnstars shop was a book. But it was no ordinary book. It was a super important part of American history, the Book of Mormon. And no, this has nothing to do with the smash hit musical that was named after it. This religious text of the movement of the Latter-day Saints apparently contains the teaching of prophets who lived in America as far back as 600 BC. The copy that was brought into the shop was only a 5th edition of the book, printed in 1842. Anyone who knows about books will tell you that the first editions are always the most valuable. In 2007, a first edition of the book was sold at auction for a whopping $180,000. But the book expert, Rebecca Romney, said this much later 5th edition was one of the most valuable books she ever had to appraise. So why was the book so expensive? Apparently, it was one of the last ones to be printed before the assassination of Joseph Smith, the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The book was valued at a whopping $40,000. After negotiating, the owner was paid $24,000 for the copy. Not a bad day's work. Number 13. Spanish Gold. We all dream of opening a box in an attic and finding treasures worth thousands. But we normally picture things like antique jewelry or stolen priceless paintings. You'd almost never expect to find actual pirate gold. But that's exactly what one man found. The man had a difficult task. He was clearing out his grandfather's house after he died. He opened a box and couldn't believe his eyes. He found a real-life gold bar. He wasn't sure how much it was really worth, but gold is always going to be an exciting thing to find. So he took it to the Pawnstars shop to find out if they had any insights. He was told that the gold on its own was worth $24,000. But the value of the gold wasn't the end of the story. It turned out this wasn't ordinary gold. It had a history. An expert explained that this was Spanish gold, recovered from a shipwreck. The ship had gone down near Padre Island in Texas in 1554. Okay, so it's not exactly pirate treasure, but it's about as close as you can get. The historical importance of this gold bar instantly doubled its value to almost $50,000, and the new lucky owner took home $35,000 for it. Number 12. Diamond earrings. How do you spot a man who really means business? When they walk into a pawn shop wearing a suit. This suited man showed up with an impressive set of diamond earrings he was looking to sell. And, like a true professional, he really knew his stuff. He was easily able to answer any question that was thrown at him. He even handed Rick the receipt for the jewels. And sure enough, the pawn shop verified that they were real diamonds. Rick was more than happy to buy them for a breathtaking $40,000. That's a lot of cash for some earrings, but there's no doubt they can turn a profit, assuming Rick had been allowed to sell them. They were real diamonds, all right, but when the cops showed up to the store a few days later, it was revealed that there was something seriously wrong with them. They were stolen. It wasn't all bad. Thanks to the police tracking down the stolen jewels, the criminal was caught and the earrings were returned to their rightful owner. But for the Pawnstars, the ending wasn't quite as happy. After all, they had just lost the $40,000 they paid for the stolen jewels. Number 11. Vic Flick Stratocaster. This is one purchase that Rick might have missed if he hadn't had his experts on hand. He wasn't that impressed when an old man walked into his shop one day carrying a vintage Fender Stratocaster. The man introduced himself as Vic Flick, and Rick didn't even take a second glance at him. Luckily, the guitar expert was on hand to get excited. That's because the expert knew exactly who Vic Flick was, even if Rick didn't think the name had any fame attached to it. Flick was actually one of the most famous studio musicians alive. He's best known for playing on the recording of the original James Bond theme song. The expert was quick to let Rick know that the real value of the gorgeous 1961 Fender Strat that Flick had brought them. He valued it at easily $60,000 to $70,000. Flick was paid an incredible $55,000 for his guitar and walked out of the shop in high spirits, explaining that he was going to take his wife out for a drink to celebrate. What's the best thing you've ever bought or sold at a pawn shop? Tell us in the comments. Number 10. JFK's Cigar Box. We know that a little bit of history can increase an item's value by a crazy amount. That was definitely the case for this simple cigar box. It doesn't look like much. It's a pretty boring box with a couple cigars inside. But what made this one special is that it once sat on the desk in the White House's Oval Office at the right hand of President John F. Kennedy. Now, if that's not impressive, I don't know what is. The owner of this very special, one-of-a-kind box knew he had something great on his hands, and he wasn't afraid to show it. He walked in with a huge asking price of $95,000. That seems about fair. After all, it's not like there's loads of those floating around. Well, there was one humidor, also belonging to JFK, that had sold at auction for a mind-blowing $575,000. In other words, $95,000 could have been a steal for this similar item. But after some haggling, they talked the owner down to a selling price of only $60,000. That's still a pretty great amount of cash to have in your pocket. Number 9. Hertz Penske GT Mustang. It's not only antiques that are valuable. One customer arrived at the pawn shop with an item from only 2014. In this case, the newish item they were hoping to sell was a rare Hertz Penske GT Mustang. There were only 150 of them created when Hertz partnered up with Roger Penske for their Rent-A-Racer program. This particular car was one of the first 10 ever built, and the 6-speed manual had never been rented, meaning it was in 100% pristine condition. That's basically the definition of rare. After taking it for a spin with NASCAR driver Joey Logano, he valued the car at an impressive $75,000. Rick managed to talk the seller down to $60,000 for it. Number 8. Panama Pacific Gold Coin. Sometimes, expensive objects don't come to the shop. Rick goes to them. That was the case on this huge purchase that saw Rick traveling to a coin auction in Florida to hunt down. A customer had asked Rick if he could get his hands on a 1915 San Francisco Panama Pacific octagonal gold coin. These coins, made of 90% gold and 10% copper, were originally minted in celebration of the opening of the Panama Canal. These days, they're pretty rare. Because they're so hard to find, the customer who asked Rick to find one was willing to pay a staggering $70,000 for it. Obviously, Rick wasn't going to pass this up. Only 2 of these coins showed up at the coin auction that Rick had gone to. Of course, Rick was hoping to do a deal with the seller with the lowest price, but it didn't work out that way. It turned out that the cheaper of the 2 options was actually a fake. That meant Rick had to try to do a deal with the seller, asking for $70,000. Buying the coin for that price would have meant Rick made no profit on it. He tried to talk the seller down, and in the end, he offered Rick a price of $67,500. Rick took it. After all, $2,500 is better than nothing. Number 7. Ford Roadster. Rick has a knack for talking down car owners. That was definitely the case for this jet black 1932 Model B Ford Roadster. The car was designed by Henry Ford's son, Edsel, and it was pretty spectacular. It boasted 500 horsepower, a convertible top, and roll-up windows, and it was still in perfect condition. The owner was super proud of it and was asking a price to match. He wanted $105,000 for it. I gotta say, I understand why. But his dreams were shattered pretty quick when the car expert showed up. He was obviously in love with the car too, but still valued it at around $75,000, which is a lot less than the owner was hoping for. In the end, Rick talked him down to only $68,250. You can bet the owner was pretty heartbroken about that deal, but somehow he still decided to take it. Number 6. $1. Only an idiot would pay any more than $1 in exchange for $1, right? Nope. If you have the right dollar in your pocket, that tiny coin might just be worth thousands of dollars. The way the owner got his hands on it is pretty interesting. He'd actually won it in a poker game. Normally, winning $1 would be pretty disappointing, but this time it was actually lucky. This coin from 1922 is highly prized by coin collectors. The one that was brought into the shop is thought to be one of only 12 in the entire world. It's not only valuable because it's rare, it's also sought after for its unique, sharp relief design. That basically just means that it features much deeper grooves and higher embossing than normal coins. This means it has a more beautiful design, but it also makes them very difficult to manufacture. The deep designs would wear out the machinery used to make the coins. That makes them incredibly rare, especially since most of them were melted down and turned back into ordinary coins pretty quick. The new owner of this rare coin knew he had something special on his hands, but his guess was it was worth about $20,000. He was so wrong. Rick's coin expert revealed that the coin could easily fetch a whopping $100,000. That lucky poker winner happily took home an incredible $80,000 for his prize. Can you hit subscribe before Rick makes another smart purchase? You have 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Number 5. Stills Gibson Guitar. How much would you pay to own a piece of rock and roll history? Well, the pawnstars handed over quite a lot of cash for exactly that. An ordinary 1941 Gibson SJ200 will fetch a pretty high price on its own. But when the owner has attached a bill of sale signed by a genuine rock legend to it, then the value of the guitar will always skyrocket. In this case, the previous owner of the Gibson was Stephen Stills from the legendary Crosby, Stills & Nash. The guitar wasn't any old piece of junk either. The beautiful piece had clearly been loved and was in basically perfect condition. Of course, Rick brought in an expert to check the authenticity of this classic instrument. The price of the guitar without Stills' name attached was already crazy. It was valued from $75,000 to potentially $90,000. If that sounds like it's already a huge win for the owner, the expert claimed that the guitar's history increased its value by at least $20,000. The owner was happy to take $85,000 for it. Number 4. Les Paul's Gibson. It's not often you find a guitar that's not just connected to music history, but also features the owner's name emblazoned on it. In case you didn't know, the Gibson Les Paul signature guitar isn't just a name chosen at random. Les Paul was a super famous musician in the 1950s who performed in a duo with his wife, Mary Ford. The pair were crazy successful, earning an incredible 28 hit records over their career. That's without even mentioning their TV and radio shows. So the already valuable Gibson Les Paul was bound to go up in price if it belonged to the real-life Les Paul at the height of his fame, and this one did. It was even played by Mary on their #1 single, How High the Moon. You can probably guess there are some people in this world willing to pay crazy amounts of cash to own this guitar, and the pawnstars were sure included in that list, especially after it was given a minimum value of $150,000 by an expert. As a shop specializing in rare antiques like this one, they gladly handed over $90,000 for it. You can bet the owner didn't mind parting with it in exchange for that kind of money. Number 3. Lincoln Roadster. It takes a lot to convince the pawnstars to buy cars, but when a beautiful classic like this one is offered to you, how can you say no? The Lincoln Roadster was originally designed as a way to win back customers from their biggest rival, Cadillac. When they were originally built in the early 20th century, they were sold with a big price tag, $4,000. That's about $70,000 today. But the pawnstars decided that the one they were looking for was worth way more. This one was a spectacular mint and cream-colored model from 1932 that had been perfectly maintained over its long life. It also featured a huge V2 engine boasting 150 horsepower. You just can't let a classic luxury car like this one go without a fight. So, they offered the owner a cash buy of $95,000. He took it, and he gave it straight back before even stepping foot outside the shop. It turned out the owner really wanted gold bars instead of the beautiful car or the cash. The pawnstars were happy to sell him what he was actually after. Number 2. A stack of silver. If there's one surefire way to store tons of cash, it's slowly gathering huge amounts of precious metals. That's exactly what one pawnstars customer did. He'd been collecting and hoarding crazy amounts of silver in a storage unit for about a decade before he showed up to sell it. Of course, this wasn't a done deal. There were coins in the collection of silver, but a lot of it was in the form of silver bars. These are pretty easy to fake because you can simply fill the middle of the bar with a much cheaper metal. So, the experts did some tests by drilling into the center of the bars. They then tested the silver at the center of the bars with nitric acid. If the metal turned white when exposed to the acid, then it really was pure silver. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. The pawnstars purchased the 3,300 ounces of silver at market price, meaning the owner walked away $110,000 richer. They melted down some of the silver to make custom coins, which would help them profit from the huge purchase. And number 1. Maurice Sendak sketches. This one's a pretty big jump from the $110,000 purchase that took our second place spot, so it'll probably sound pretty shocking when I tell you that this giant purchase was just a stack of old sketches. They must have been pretty special to fetch this price from the pawnstars. But these were not the sort of artworks you'd expect. This wasn't a Picasso in sight. Instead, these were sketches from a children's book. They clearly spoke to Rick personally. He even said that this book was the greatest of all time. So what was it? These were the original sketches from the Maurice Sendak's classic, Where the Wild Things Are. One of the biggest reasons these sketches were so valuable was that Sendak never sold any prints of the artwork. That meant that these little sheets of paper were one of a kind. Rick called in an art expert to put a value on the artwork and was told they could easily sell for a huge $310,000. Rick convinced the lucky owner to sell them all for just $250,000. Even though that's a crazy sum, it was actually a steal with a minimum $60,000 profit. Love this video? Then you don't want to miss this one.